Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley McManus, Director of Marketing at Affectiva. Welcome to Affectiva Asks, a human-centric AI podcast where each episode we will interview a thought leader doing cutting-edge work in the AI space. A little bit about us. Affectiva is the pioneer of emotion AI, software that can detect nuanced human emotions, complex cognitive states, behaviors, activities, and interactions. And Affectiva is applying this technology to optimize brand content and media spend by measuring consumer emotional responses to videos, ads, and TV shows unobtrusively and at scale. Today's episode features Dr. Rana Kaliouby and Graham Page from Affectiva talking with iMotions Vice President of Product Management, Olee Jensen, about the launch of iMotions' new online data collection tool. This last year, many organizations have been forced to pivot and incorporate new technologies into their businesses as a result of the pandemic. Media analytics researchers that previously gathered data from in-person participant studies suddenly found themselves looking for a solution in order to continue to move projects forward safely and efficiently. Recognizing this immediate need with the market and for their clients, iMotions created their new online data collection tool. Together, utilizing Affectiva's Emotion AI technology, this tool enables research organizations to continue to execute studies that integrate biometric, behavioral, and self-report data virtually. Let's listen in on the conversation to learn more.
Hi, everyone. Welcome wherever you are tuned in from. I am Rana Kaliouby, co-founder and CEO of Affectiva. As you know, we are an MIT Media Lab spinoff on a mission to humanize technology. I hope you're all staying well and staying safe and staying connected. So I'm very excited to kick off this live stream. We are partnering today. One of our partners, we've been working with iMotions for a number of years now. They are in the business of quantifying people's emotions across multiple modalities. And so they have these incredible data collection tools that allow you to do research in consumer behavior and gain behavioral insights using multiple modalities. So I'm here to welcome Olee Jensen, VP of Product at iMotions, and of course, our very own Graham Page, the Global Managing Director of our media analytics business at Affectiva.
Hello.
Do you want to introduce yourselves?
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Anna. I'm the VP of Product in iMotions, so overseeing the various products that we have. And we're going to talk a lot about the online data collection today and also about the desktop product that we have. So I've been with iMotions for 16 years. I actually just had my own anniversary Monday, I believe it was. Started in development many years ago, and then I went into the more client-facing things of the business as a product specialist. And then at some point, we started the office in Boston in USA. So I moved over there with our CEO, Peter Hansfeld, to start up that office. I thought I was just going to be there for a year, but I ended up staying there for 7 years and just recently returned back to Copenhagen. I also work a lot on the partnership side of the business, and that's so I'm very familiar with Affectiva through many years. Actually, we started back in the day when you had the Q sensor, the wristbands. So we had clients asking for integration of the Q sensor into the iMotion software. So I was working with your team to get that happen. And then later, we of course moved on to the facial expression engine that we have today. So I know Affectiva very well over many years.
Great to have you. Graham?
Yep, I'm Graham Page. I run the media analytics division here at Affectiva. So that's the part of the business that helps people in the marketing and market research sphere understand people's emotional responses to content, to experiences, and as part of interviews. I've been at Affectiva here for I guess a year and a half now, but prior to that, I was Affectiva's largest client at Kantar Millward Brown. I worked for many years in the neuromarketing industry. So was very familiar with the iMotions technology as part of that process, and have worked with the Affectiva technology obviously for many years as part of that. So I'm really glad to be here. Want to hear a lot more about how the iMotions technology is continuing to use the emotion AI that Affectiva brings. So looking forward to today.
Maybe we start with that. Give us an example of some of the customers that iMotions have and how they use, the iMotions platform and maybe also Affectiva's technology to drive insights.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think maybe it would be good just for people who are not familiar with iMotions to understand how it all works. So, I mean, iMotions is a software company. We build software that connects to all the different kinds of modalities that we mentioned before, Rana. So it could be eye tracking, facial expressions, of course, physiological sensors like galvanic skin response and heart rate and so on. And then the software combines all the different modalities, synchronizes the data, and offers an analysis capabilities as well. So it's not just the raw data, you actually get ways to extract metrics and high-level insights from that data. So in terms of specific examples, we have media companies using iMotions. So it could be testing like pilot TV shows or trailers, advertisements, and so on. And that would typically be a combination of eye tracking and facial expressions and perhaps galvanic skin response. But we also have a lot of clients in the academic space. So it can be anything from like basic psychology research, psychophysiology, into communications, marketing, and so on. So yeah, broadly speaking, we have a lot of different types of clients. So yeah, I think that answers your question, right?
Yeah, one of my favorite common clients that we have together is UMass Boston, Professor Stephen Benoit, who uses the iMotions platform. He specializes in research around depression and mental health and actually suicidal intent. And I find his work fascinating. So he essentially, has this population that are at risk of suicide. And he's able to measure all sorts of modalities, as you said, including facial expressions and physiological responses, to flag who's at risk of becoming suicidal. And I think it's just very powerful work, and it's an example of the breadth, I guess, of applications of which the iMotions platform is being used.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Stephen Benoit very well. Actually, we do have an additional client doing similar things, but in Europe. And it's interesting because it's on a prison population. So I don't remember which country it is, but there is a high risk of suicide in prisons. And there's research going on to understand the people in that condition, what triggers that kind of decision. So it's one of the more interesting aspects of using the technology.
That's amazing. So usually the iMotions platform is basically used in the lab, right? Can you talk about that? And then we'll use that as a segue into your new product.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. So yes, I mean, basically 95% of the clients or high percentage of clients, they would do in-lab research or central location research. So that could be on a university campus, or it could be a dedicated lab space that a company has, maybe a market research company, something like that. And they would invite participants in to go through a test or a study. So it's all lab-based, and the idea is, of course, when you have these controlled environments, that you get the best possible data, first of all, but also, of course, the sensors that you need to, or the researchers need to conduct the research, they can only exist in a lab space. So an eye tracker is a dedicated piece of hardware that would have to live in a lab, or a physiological sensor like a galvanic skin response sensor, heart rate sensor, or EEG. It's something that you only find in a lab. So of course that's very important to have those control conditions, that you don't have external noise that can influence the result of the research. But of course, when you use facial expression analysis for your research, all you need is a camera. And the camera can be in any kind of device, right? A laptop or a tablet or a phone. At home, where people are, they have tons of cameras already today. So that, of course, is an opportunity to capture some research data where people are at home. So that is, of course, one of the foundations of the online data collection, is that you can basically just send out a study to where the participants live, collect the data, and then use that for research.
That's amazing. So Graham, this sounds very familiar to us, right? Because especially in the last year, we've seen a lot of the market research industry pivot or accelerate, I guess, their work in the online space. Can you share a little bit about what we're seeing as well?
Yeah, Yeah, no, there's real parallels with what we've seen, and clearly, obviously, a lot of our technology was, I guess, originally envisaged to work in the kind of virtual environment where people are say, taking market research projects at home, but also clearly we've been used all over the world, including in the iMotions platform, for the kind of centralized data collection that Olee talked about earlier. So, we're lucky enough to see that the technology is flexible enough to work in either environment, but certainly, COVID and the pandemic and the resulting lockdowns has just completely upended the way that a lot of market research is done. We've seen, as a consequence, actually, a huge kind of increase in interest among, for instance, the qualitative research community. So people who would typically do focus groups and get people together and kind of sit with them and really kind of be able to kind of look at them and understand not just what they're saying, but how they're saying it. We've seen a lot of interest from those groups now because they just can't do that anymore. So, the Zoom focus group has become very much a ubiquitous thing in the market research industry. And that's fantastic that those technologies exist now to enable that work to carry on. But it's clearly also been a bit of a barrier, I think, for a lot of qualitative researchers because they lack a little bit of that feel. So we've definitely seen people come to us in much bigger numbers in the last year or so to try and get that sense of that emotional read rather more clearly from a virtual environment through the use of facial expression analysis. So yeah, it's had a big impact on the research industry, and we've seen that in the interest really in our technology. Just as a little stat, I guess in 2019, about a third of the work that we did, certainly in say the ad testing and the content testing space, was done in central locations, and particularly in kind of developing markets like India and Southeast Asia, where those ways of doing research were very entrenched. So about a third of that work was done in central location. Once the pandemic hit and as lockdowns bit, that dropped about 4%. So wow. and we've seen relatively little of that come back. So I think we're looking at some quite profound and long-lived changes, certainly in the research industry.
Olee, so can you say a little bit about, is the online data collection tool a product that you had in the making pre-COVID, or was that a super quick response to the pandemic?
Yeah, so that's actually a good question, because historically, iMotions, we have always defined ourselves as a research tool for in-lab, central location type of testing, where you get the best possible research data. And that's basically what we've been doing since day one. Occasionally, of course, there are some of the research that's taken out into the wild, but the main has always been in-lab research. So when the Corona happens, a lot of our clients actually came to us and said, we would really like to continue using iMotions, but we can't get our participants into the lab, obviously. And it was pretty much like a 90% drop in activity in terms of lab activities. So they came to us and said, why can't we somehow collect the data through a browser or something like that where participants are at home, and then use the analysis tools that are already in the software we have today for analyzing the data that they would capture through the browser. And I think possibly we were a bit thick-headed initially, so we didn't think that the Corona would sort of be here for so long as it has. So we're like, it's gonna probably be over in a few months and we'll be back in business again. But of course, that's not what happened. But we had one particular client that was had a very good idea of sort of partnering to build a certain project, and that was University of South Florida. It was the Center for Marketing and Sales Innovation, and they had actually just recently received a big grant from an organization called it was a Stop Smoking. Florida Stop Smoking, something like that organization. So that grant should go towards understanding how stop smoking advertisements work and if they're going to change behavior. But they were supposed to do that in lab, but then they thought, why not use some of this grant to build an online solution? So we did that actually in collaboration with USF in order for them to fulfill that research that they had to do for this project. So that actually started the whole online data collection product. And in a few months, we were actually able to build features enough to collect data through the browser. And all we needed was a way to present the stimuli, the images, the videos, the surveys, and so on, capture the webcam feeds, and then save that information, and then you can import it into your existing iMotion solution for post-processing of facial expressions. So that project was entirely based on self-reported facial expressions. And they were able to actually get some interesting findings that said something about how likely are participants to actually go to a website for stop smoking or share on social media these kind of messages of stop smoking. And they were able to predict, based on facial expressions and surveys, whether or not they were going to make this kind of action. So the combination of facial expressions and surveys was stronger than just a self-report alone. So I thought that was an interesting outcome of that.
Yeah, there's definitely some parallels there as well with some of the broader work that we've been doing over the years. I mean, we've got a number of both kind of research agency clients that work with our technology, and obviously through them, some of the world's biggest advertisers work with our technology to pre-test a lot of the content that they then run on TV and online. And interestingly, kind of partners like Kantar, for instance, have used the combination of people's facial expressions, and particularly their kind of the extent to which people are animated and expressive when they watch the content, alongside the survey answers that they get from as part of their survey interviews, to then refine the predictions that they make about the sales effectiveness of those ads. So again, there's some really interesting work being done in the past that shows, again, it's that combination of both what people say, but also their kind of in the moment expressions and in the moment emotional responses that actually leads to a stronger prediction of sales effectiveness. So yeah, definitely some clear parallels, Olee, with what you've seen in that particular anti-smoking campaign.
First is, does iMotion have any customers in the healthcare or wellness space, and maybe especially in the context of the online data collection tool? Maybe you can share where you're seeing that, that industry moving.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, historically, we have a lot of clients in the healthcare space. I think the most prominent one that I can mention is Johnson & Johnson, who are using iMotions in combination with facial expression analysis, actually, for autism research. And that's something that, you can actually find that information online if you want to read more about it. So we do a fair amount in the healthcare space. Wellness, maybe not so much. Not something that I'm aware of, but healthcare for sure. But in terms of using it for online data collection and healthcare, there's certainly a lot of interest. Actually, I mean, the past many months during Corona, we actually got a lot of requests for using something like Affectiva to understand, let's say, patient-doctor interaction through online meetings, right? Because that's where things are going. Like telemedicine is really a hot subject right now. And because of Corona, but it was also before. And I think Corona definitely has accelerated the interest in how can you use tools like Affectiva to maybe diagnose or somehow get some additional insights in these kind of interactions online between patients and doctors, or therapists and patients. So I think that's definitely something we're going to see a lot more of in now and in the future. And we are here basically as a platform that allow you to experiment with this technology, right? So iMotions, we are a research platform. So if you have research to answer the question whether or not you can diagnose patients online, or you can get additional insights online, then we are the ones who can help you to answer that research question. And in case you actually figure out that it does make a difference, then the next step is, of course, to productize it somehow. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's really amazing, and I know we've seen a lot of the work you're doing in this space, and hopefully there's going to be even more. We've had partners look at the facial and vocal biomarkers of things like depression and anxiety and stress. And then in the telehealth space, I think iMotions can be super powerful, quantifying patient-doctor interactions that are now happening virtually, and maybe even doing A/B tests, right? So if the doctor's spending most of his or her time like looking down, how does that affect, how does that affect the patient outcomes versus if they're looking at the patient? And of course, you use eye tracking too. So bringing in eye tracking could be super powerful.
I was just going to say, I mean, I'm going to build with a relatively trivial example from the advertising space, but it's interesting that we've seen, in some of the work we do there, that you can tell whether people are in a better place having seen a piece of content than they were compared to the start. So there's certainly, I think, relevant. There's evidence that you can pick up those signals. One small example, we did a lot of work again with our partners at Kantar looking at advertising around the COVID pandemic last year. And one of the things that was interesting was that, there were a lot of campaigns initially at the start that were all about kind of offering, I guess, kind of psychological help and support to everybody, because everybody was, we were on a tough spot and lots of brands wanted to kind of empathize. It was interesting that if you kind of looked at whether those ads on average tended to leave people feeling supported and in a better place, on average they didn't. The ads that left people in a more positive frame of mind compared to the start when they began to watch were actually the ads that talked about the concrete steps that businesses were taking. So actually, something concrete that said, here's how we're helping keep you safe and keep our staff safe, actually ended up giving people, I guess, more hope than just the big grand gesture of a big ad campaign that said, hey, we're all going to be okay. So I think there's something interesting in that about what really feels like it helps and what doesn't, and certainly the signals that we can pick up and that iMotions can pick up through their new online data collection tool. I think they're certainly there and will be helpful in understanding how people feel after all sorts of interventions.
Absolutely. How can representative data be collected from diverse parts of the world across diverse populations, including various races and ethnicities? And it would be good for both Affectiva and iMotions to comment on that. So let's get the iMotions perspective first on how you think about diversity.
Yeah, absolutely. So online data collection, obviously, it enables you to collect data through a web browser. And internet is almost everywhere in the world. I guess since now we have Starlink, essentially it is everywhere in the world. So you could reach basically any kind of population anywhere in the world if you want to. So I think that's the foundation for getting out and getting all sorts of populations represented in your data set. So speaking from an iMotions perspective, we don't develop, let's say, the machine learning algorithms that build on top of that data, but we can help you to get the data so that if you are someone who wants to develop certain algorithms to, let's say, diagnose people with autism or some other condition, then you could use the online data collection to collect the data from all sorts of populations, from all sorts of countries, which will generate a huge data set that you can then use for your machine learning activities afterwards. So that's how I see our role in that.
Graham?
Yep. I guess a couple of points to make. I mean, one is, the ubiquity of cameras now does mean that it is way easier to get to populations around the world that would, I think, even 2 years ago would have been harder to recruit for. So, I think that, the ubiquity of camera technology, particularly camera phones, makes data collection easier. But there are, of course, lots of cultural nuances that you then have to take into account. So again, that's where I guess our range over the years has become very helpful. So, we have worked in over 90 countries around the world. We've got the kind of, average response to content, if you like, from populations in almost all the kind of major markets that you can think of. So yes, absolutely, people are less expressive in certain populations. So you get a very different set of averages in Japan and Russia and Korea compared to Latin America and the US and so on. So having those, having that kind of depth of experience means that we can provide those contexts, and that's an important way of making a fair comparison across markets. But the second piece, again, is because of that breadth of data collection that we've had over the years, again, we can make sure that when we're training the algorithms, we're using a diverse population for training purposes, which means we can have a lot of faith in the accuracy of the facial classifiers across, again, different populations. So this isn't a system that, for instance, has just been trained on young white populations. It's been trained on populations from all over the world, and again, I think that makes a big difference in being able to get an accurate and representative view of people's responses pretty much anywhere.
Which then ensures that the iMotions solution ultimately, is able to be deployed and used by customers all over the world. Mm-hmm. What is the accuracy of the web-based eye tracking part of the iMotion solution? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, of course. So yes, indeed, we do have webcam-based eye tracking, and it's a very recent addition to the online data collection. So we started out with the facial expressions, but then we added this webcam-based eye tracking later. It all depends on the conditions that the data was collected under. So there are a few caveats that I probably want to mention before talking about specific numbers. So webcam-based eye tracking is different from facial expression analysis because it does require the participants to be much more compliant with the instructions of sitting still during the recording. Facial expression analysis, Affectiviva's engine, is quite robust to movements, so you can have different angles, distances, and lighting conditions, and so on. But webcam-based eye tracking is very sensitive to lighting conditions and contrast and so on. And you can almost see it just from this live feed that the amount of pixels that represent my eyes is very small, so therefore it's much harder to get good accuracy with webcam-based eye tracking. If under ideal circumstances, I would say, you can probably expect, we have some numbers that point towards like 2 to 3 degrees visual angle accuracy precision, but that's under highly ideal circumstances. If you send it out to respondents in where they are in their natural habitat, so to speak, you're not going to see that kind of performance every day, unless you're very good at explaining the participants how to follow the recommended setup, like having enough light, sitting still in front of the camera, things like that. So that number is something you can achieve under ideal circumstances.
Can you comment on, and Graham, you've done a lot of work in this too, the combination of using facial expressions with eye tracking? And maybe, I don't know if you have any examples to share on the power of combining these two modalities, if you like.
It's great, obviously, to know what people are, the way people are responding and how they feel when they're looking at the content they're looking at. But for certain circumstances, it's also hugely helpful to then also know where exactly on the screen they were looking. So in a lot of the work we do in, understanding response to digital content that's in, different social media feeds and so on, knowing whether that smile was because people were watching the content or actually were kind of looking somewhere else on the screen is really important. So combining those two things is very powerful in what we do in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I can add to my previous answer that if we can actually break the accuracy down into sort of horizontal and vertical accuracy. And it turns out that if you look at the horizontal axis, you can probably get better accuracy than the vertical axis because it's easier to see those sideways movements of the eye. And it's interesting because you can actually use that information to make a better research design that's fitted to the limitations of the technology. So if you are indeed interested in visual attention on a screen, on a stimulus, and you need to know what element attracts more attention, you can design your stimulus to be horizontally oriented more than vertically oriented, and for that reason, you would get better data. That's not always possible, but in some cases, it can be done.
If our models are based on fake data, whether that leads to non-generalized models, and how do we process that? So, Graham, that's an excellent question for you because, of course, you don't use models.
Indeed. So, yeah, I mean, I think it comes back again to kind of where the data is being sourced from for training purposes, right? So, again, we have we're in the fortunate position that we're collecting data in a very controlled way, typically through our partners. They're typically people being recruited for research projects, so it's very naturalistic, real world data, and we know they're real people, and that again allows us to make sure that we're training in an appropriate way among representative groups, but also with very real world data, so it's able, the algorithms are able to handle kind of the poor video you sometimes get from a mobile phone, for instance, because we've trained it on that kind of input. So yeah, we're lucky enough to be able to have a lot of faith in the data that we collect, and for other purposes as well. When we need to go and do something completely new, then obviously we also have our own data collection group in Boston and Cairo who can then go and help us source data that we can have faith in. But yeah, it comes back to where you source the data ultimately.
Yeah, and maybe I can add to that too, because we do a lot of work in the automotive industry, which is a lot of challenging situations, changing lighting conditions, movement, lots of things in the background. And so we have our own data collection teams, as Graham said, both in Boston and Cairo, and partners actually around the world where we're able to tap into a very diverse, not just diverse set of humans, but also a diverse conditions for the data we use for training. All right, so I want to start wrapping up. I think the past year has shown us, obviously it's been challenging in all sorts of ways, but it has allowed for this accelerated pace of innovation and an accelerated pace of adoption of new technology. So I want to get both your thoughts on where you think the future is headed, especially around some of these research approaches and platforms.
So I think from our perspective, the value of what we do is that the more data we can provide researchers, the better. So we have the infrastructure for them to design a study and get some data back. And right now, it supports the facial expression from Affectiva. There's some webcam-based eye tracking. And then we could also imagine adding some more data sources in there. So it is well known that you can extract something like heart rate from the camera. It's probably quite noisy, just like so many other things, but there might be certain situations where it's still useful. It could be respiration or motion tracking. All these things are developing right now because of machine learning and how that has sort of become extremely mature and popular. So I think that's the direction that we are going, is to add more of this kind of information to the system, extract that information from the video feed so that people wanted to research, they can do more with the data that they have. So that's at least one thing that we will be working on to support doing online research. But then there's also maybe the expanded definition of online to remote. We have a couple of initiatives where, as Graham mentioned before, using smartphones for data collection, but not just the camera. It could also be connecting the smartphone to like a fitness watch, so you get the more proper heart rate sensor data or some artificial watchful sensors, and then use this kind of long-term recording to understand how does the human condition change over time, like hours or days or weeks even, so you can ask entirely new research questions. And the last thing I think that might be relevant to talk about is, from our perspective, is like coming back to this telehealthcare scenario, using virtual reality headsets. So we are actually involved in a project right now of using VR for social anxiety treatments. And that's going to be in lab for now during this research phase. But if we are successful with that, the idea is, of course, to bring that into the homes of the patients suffering from that condition. And that's going to, again, be something that's like online enabled. So the data is getting back to the therapist so they can monitor the progress of the treatment from their office while they're taking the treatment at home using VR headsets. So those are some, I think, really interesting perspectives for the future of using something like iMotions and facial expressions and eye tracking and all these technologies.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, Olee, because, I mean, again, I was very involved in the early days of kind of the neuromarketing movement, and one of the biggest challenges for taking the kind of the methods that cognitive psychologists use all the time and out of the lab and getting them into the hands of industry was always the scalability. It was always the fact that doing work in a location is hard and for certain cases kind of expensive. The fact that you're talking about using some of these additional sensors, these fitness trackers, the options that phones bring is really interesting, because it then begins to bring some of these additional signals back into the fold of much more scalable projects. So, we've again always been, I guess, fortunate that the technology we use is very scalable, allows you to go out to people all over the world via a phone or a laptop. But yeah, if there are more signals being able to come in through that modality, then clearly there's a much more rounded picture, which is exciting. I think the other point I'd make is we've certainly seen, I think, the growth in DIY research platforms, for instance. So platforms that people are able to kind of set up their own kind of research projects on, and again, we've seen a lot more interest in integrating our technology with those DIY platforms. For some of our clients, quite a lot of their work is coming through those kind of platforms now, and I think this will accelerate because of the changes that people have had to make over the last 12 months. So some of those changes are absolutely here to stay. And I think we'll see a lot more people, I guess, using what might be considered, more advanced, slightly scarier technologies like facial expression analysis, but within their own DIY projects. And again, I think, things like the online data collection tool that you have, the kind of algorithms we have, I think are well suited to that future.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you both for joining today. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rana.
Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Stay safe.
Bye.
iMotions is a wonderful partner of ours, and this innovative product launch of theirs is really exciting for market researchers navigating data collection, not just in times of pandemic, but could also pave the way for the future of data collection. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe to Affectiva's Human-Centric AI podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts for new episodes. We are also on social media, so please reach out to us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Affectiva to share any feedback you have on the show and weigh in on the discussion using hashtag AffectivaAsks. Don't forget to rate us and comment with your feedback to help make the podcast more discoverable for others. Until next time, thanks for listening.